Yeah, hi, my name is Chris McGinley, and I'm the author of Hail, Holy Queens. Welcome to One Final Twist.
Chris, I'm super excited to talk to you. So I did a little research and made some notes on you too for your introduction. You are a Lexington, Kentucky writer and middle school teacher. So is that fifth, sixth, seventh, or what grades are we talking?
I teach sixth, seventh, and eighth, but it is fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth, and I teach at the state's oldest independent school, Sayre School. It's in Lexington, Kentucky.
Ah, yeah, they're single A, right? Sayre's single A for track at least.
We have a
Yeah.
couple different conferences in different sports. Yeah.
Yeah. So my girls went to Williamsburg and they're
Oh
single
yeah.
A track athletes. And so we would see Sayer
Yeah.
come up and like, nope, we're gonna lose. Nope.
That's fun. Yeah.
Okay, so you have previously published a collection, Coal Black, and then this one and it's really interesting. Once these hills. So when I first started going on, like putting my time and effort into the Bookstagram thing, I was at a little bar, and you were there next to Laurel Hightower, and I got
Yeah.
this book signed.
Oh, cool.
That was one of my first books I ever picked up. Um, and your newest novel, Hail Holy Queens, is described as a gothic horror story involving a convent of nuns, mysterious mind controlling beast, which is equal parts dread, mystery, and dark imagination.
That's true. Yeah, that's how I would describe it. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a ton of questions because there's a lot to unpack in a short amount of time in this book. So tell everybody who's watching or listening the premise of the book.
Yeah, the premise is it's a late 19th century, and there's a convent in the Berkshires, which is a mountain range in western Massachusetts. It's an old convent, and there's the nuns are besieged by for lack of a better word, a demonic creature. But rather than cower and hide in the convent, they create makeshift weapons and they slay one of the beasts, and then they go on the hunt. And the rest of the novel is essentially a sort of an action-packed kind of page-turner thing about the nuns. It's about questions about their faith and the relationship of men to women in society at the time. And it also involves, I won't say a whole lot about it, but the arrival of a sort of a mystic saint or a mystic nun. And she has experience fighting these kinds of creatures, and she's from France, and she sort of just mysteriously arrives. So she becomes a critical figure in the novel.
She really is very mysterious. So, but the first question I have is once these hills and this book take place in the late 1800s, they're like right like 1896, both of them are a
Yes,
little close to each other. What draws you to that era to write in?
yeah, it's funny you should ask that. Well, a lot of the literature I like to read is from that era. The American writers, and not only the American writers, but the British writers of that period, even some of the French writers. So I like the period. The period itself really has a draw for me. So I was compelled to set things there. I like to research. I'm still have like a scholarly bent to some of my books and some of the work that I do outside of fiction writing. And so I'm interested in that period as a historian too, or as a quasi historian.
One of the parts that I really liked was what brought some of the women to the convent.
Yeah.
And there is, I mean, there is, you've got enough facts about the way that women were treated, the way that their men saw them, how mental illness was handled, little things like that, that puts them in there. That's enough little fodder to really put you right in the place where this happens.
Yeah, I think people who've read it so far are surprised to learn some of that stuff you just mentioned about the sort of patriarchal structures that were in place at the time, and women's women's roles, generally
Mhm.
speaking, domestically and such. And so um, the convent is like a place where several people from different aspects of that culture come together, and they can learn about one another, and you can read about different about nuns who are sort of on the continuum from, they just, some of them have had nothing to do with men, and some of them have been married, and some have even been prostitutes.
Okay, I've got to jump right to the gulo. okay?
Yeah,
Because I am a ginormous rabbit holer. If there's something I don't know. So I spend a
yeah.
lot of time, probably too much, figuring out exactly where a gulo comes from, the history behind it, the mythology behind it, like all of these things. How did you first figure this guy out?
Well, I had written a piece of flash fiction years ago where I created this figure based on some things that I'd read about wolves and then possibly werewolves, of course, in France that had attacked women, Catholics, and some true stories about some of these beasts and in rural areas in central France and etc. And just researching other kind of ghouls and goblins and such. And I created this creature. I thought it would be cool to make a creature look the way that this one did, like fast but also large.
He is very they are very
Yeah,
visceral. They're very in your face. They're creepy. I could see them in my sleep.
yeah,
Like
good.
they're very descriptive. I know what they look like. I know.
Yeah,
I hope to God I never see one.
yeah,
One thing that in going down one of the rabbit holes was that the gula is often um uh, paired with the word gluttony.
yeah. It's a cognate.
So
Yeah.
yeah, my question is, does that have to do with their the amaro that the nuns drink? Like, is there a connection there, or
The,
that I missed,
yeah,
or
there's not a connection there per se, but there is absolutely a connection in the sense that this creature is a gluttonous fiend, and the nuns themselves, in their interest in, they brew like a lot of nuns in convents in the era, and even still today, they usually produce a product to help sustain the convent, and so there is a danger in their overconsumption of their own alcohol that they create, so like an aperitif, and yet it's sort of what gives them some strength and courage, and it's almost like a magic elixir.
yeah, it was. I didn't put that the gluttony part together until the very end of it. I thought, oh man, was
Yeah.
I supposed to pick that up earlier? Should I
No, I
reread
don't
it?
think so. Yeah.
What was the original? Was the original piece of fodder that flash fiction that you wrote? Is that where this story started?
It was years and years ago. And in fact, I'm 60 years old, and I didn't start writing until I was 50. This might be an interesting story for some of your writers and listeners. And I still consider myself a young writer in the sense I've only been going 10 years. But it was a piece of flash fiction it was about, uh, again, set in like a religious community. And but if I had not had that published, I don't think, there was just a little 1,000 word thing. I don't know that I would be here today doing this interview, because I don't know that I would have stuck with it. I should have started before that, but it's never too late.
Religious settings, themes, things of that nature. It's and this is you're the second book that I've read this year that has a big religious theme background in it.
Yeah.
And people will tiptoe around it. I am, just for the record, I'm not a tiptoer. Like, but I don't have anything bad to say. Was it hard to stay in a lane with that?
Now, one of the things that I tell people about this novel is, has it, this fully is squarely fits within religious horror, and religious horror as a genre can be really, really different. So you might have something on the one end of it. There's even a term that people use called nunsploitation, a sort of subgenre of film and books where nuns, are involved in some horrific thing, but some of that is really, again, exploitative. You have sexual situations and stuff like this, and it's what I would say is the fetishization of the nun. And then I think, hopefully, my book has not seen anything like that. There's no sexuality in it. There's no open sexuality in it, and I I want to treat these nuns reverently. As crazy as the premise is, as outlandish and outrageous as the story is, it's fantastical, of course. It's about a group of nuns who go and slay these beasts. And yet I reject that term nunsploitation. It's a reverent novel, if you can believe that. I really mean it to be that way. And I think people who think about it will and read it will say, wow, this treats these nuns as heroically, not just in their physical warrior action, but in their day-to-day lives, to sublimate your the rest of your life and devote it to one purpose is amazing to me. And it's especially rare today, nowadays.
That so this kind of leads into my next question, and you kind of covered it, that nuns have been in the horror genre for a long time.
Yeah.
And it is really cool that you have avoided those cliches, or you said nun exploitation.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool about that because they are strong, and they come together, and they have their makeshift weapons, and they decide how they're going to survive each piece of the story, like how they're gonna, and they're wild, and sometimes those
Yeah.
nuns, I'm like, oh my Lanta. But you got to think about it. What would you do if you were in their shoes?
That's right. It's this novel also has to do with isolation and with people who are just they must act, you know, and they do. And I think that their ability for them to act is bound up with their faith, with their saying, hey, you know what? We have to do this. Maybe we'll be martyred, but maybe we won't.
Um, so your students are old enough and to read, like some of this, do they know what you write?
Some of them have read these novels with their parents' permission. My other novel, there are two scenes. They're not illicit, but they're definitely rated R scenes, and some of the stories are too. Definitely, this novel is pretty gory, so a kid would have to have permission to read it, or his parents might just say, "Hey, let's read it." But they're asked more out of like their interest is not so much in reading it, but just saying like, "Hey, wow, look at that! You wrote a book. You wrote a book," and so it's nice. The school here, Sayre School, supports all my writing community activities, conferences I go to, and things like that. I think that's really fantastic too. So there is an intersection with Sayre School and with the student body and with the faculty and the administration and my work. Yeah,
Is that what you do? You teach in that?
I teach in sixth, seventh, and eighth grade English and social studies. Yeah,
Oh, so you get to cross up two things you love.
I
That's
do.
cool.
That's right. Yeah,
And I think it would be neat because middle schoolers are really hard to deal with. And like just as a whole, I mean, I've raised them, I've coached them. It's a whole situation. Middle school teachers are special people. Um, but that would give them something to look forward to find out what their teacher is up to, and it's setting a good example.
all teachers should of middle schoolers and even high schoolers. I say it is incumbent upon all teachers to let your students know that you have another life, or even if you've had one, if you have played hockey or basketball or tennis or did track in your high school, show your kids your high school yearbook, no matter what your age is. It's important to them to know that we have other lives and that those lives are intersect with our teaching lives and with our understanding of them. So whatever it is you do, we have someone on staff here who's an actor. He acts regularly in theater, he directs and stuff. And it's a big part of it. The students are interested in that.
Yeah, that's really cool. I taught kindergarten, and I was magic, so I didn't have to have a real life.
Uh-huh.
I got to have all the sparkles and magic and eyes really in the back of my head, so it was perfect for
Yeah.
me. Was there a particular nun that was hard to write that you had a hard time like staying with them?
The main character was difficult to write. This character, this is not a spoiler. This character comes from is a society woman, as they would say. She's a wealthy woman who was in a loveless marriage and was sent, as many women were at the time, for the wealthy women for the cure for neurasthenia, which is really an illness that doesn't exist. It's a way for men to get rid of wives they didn't want to have. And so it was difficult to write that. In several respects. One, it involved a lot of research, but two, I would really have to consider the full horizon of her own psychological her past and her psychology before I wrote each and every scene. What would make sense for this person and that person? How would the other women react to her? So that was the hardest to write.
Did I liked her reflections, like when she would say, "Dear reader, like let me
Yeah,
take a breath, let me stop for a second and tell you what I want."
yeah,
Was it is it hard to switch gears from the action to her, or and that next question would be, or kind of together is, did you write the her reflections at one time and then all of the action at one time and then layer
yeah.
them together, or how did you do that?
I didn't. For when writers of the 19th century say "dear reader," it's almost the sort of convention of some of the older novels, Victorian era and even earlier. So that's not an uncommon thing. But that was built in for me. But I wrote the whole thing about her husband and her interactions with her husband, the detail of those moments, which occupy a lot of space in the book after the fact. An editor had told me, said, we need to have, and again, this is why it was difficult to write, we need to have some rationale for her being there and what she would be like and why she would act this way. Wouldn't she just want to get out of there? Well, no, because what she has to go back to is maybe, now she's needed, she's wanted, she's a heroine now, you know. And so I wrote that after the fact, and I'm glad I did. That my editor Zoe Quinton encouraged me to write that, and that was easy to write that part.
Did you have to back out any of the scenes? Did you ever get to a point where you said that's too gory? Because
Yeah,
there's some good gory pieces in here.
yeah. There was some people were concerned about the. There's a scene in here. I won't say much about it, but the nuns have an encounter with a non with a human with a human rather and a priest, and it's not pretty. And there was a lot of talk about whether that scene should remain in the book, and I made an argument for it. And I think that might be one that some people might say, "Wow, this is really." But I wanted to create a ton of tension and a ton of anxiety, and I'm hoping that scene did. We'll see what people say about it.
I think that it brought them together in a better sense to go and fight what they needed to fight.
That's right. That's what I wanted to do, is to have a unifying event, an event that was so cataclysmic that the nuns would that nobody would be on the fence. Everyone would
Yeah.
want to say, we must do this, you know.
Yeah. Well, there's a hierarchy inside of the convent, and
Yeah,
then and they they have to like mind, I guess you want to say, or obey. Like there's the rules you have to follow, the things
for
you have to do.
sure.
And then when that person comes in, they're like, nope, we're gonna do this. We
Yeah.
beat this, now we're gonna beat this. Now it's like they were very empowered. As the story went on, they become more empowered.
Yes, absolutely. And so it's interesting you say that. In the sequel that I've begun to write, there's this chaos at the convent now. And so I won't say which nuns because we don't know who survives the novel we're talking about. But yeah, they need another unifying event because there's chaos, and now there's different factions in this follow-up novel that I'm writing.
I did not know there was going to
Yeah,
be
there
another
are
one.
nuns who want absolutely are spoiling for another war and who don't want to return to the convent way, and there are those in the middle who kind of want to and kind of don't, and there are those ones who said, we have to return to our humble ways. So there's a lot of factional fighting in this follow-up novel. Yeah,
Well, I look forward to I'm going
yeah.
to have to read that one now. Is there a book or a movie that kind of inspired you to, maybe become a writer, but even inspired you or said, we're going down this direction in the, to help you pick the genre that you write in?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of different books that have inspired me. They're not very exciting to mention them, but it's absolutely true that they're formative. The stories of Washington Irving, some of the early the stories of Poe and Hawthorne, and there's a Kentucky writer, Janice Holt Giles, who wrote in
Mhm.
the 50s and 60s and 70s, even into the 70s, and she wrote these westerns and these wild pioneer stories in the East, in Appalachia. These novels all, both in their action and in their content thematically, all these writers, Herman Melville, they all made me want to do right. They all made me want to write. Giles in particular, I almost, a lot of Kentuckians don't know Giles any longer, but they should. Yeah,
That's my sister is a librarian at the University of the Cumberlands,
yeah.
and that she will sing praises there. So
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool to know. Yeah.
yeah.
I've been doing, Wilma Dykeman, another one who inspired me to write things like this. I've been doing some stuff. I talk here and there about Appalachian fiction, and I go to the Appalachian Studies Association and do readings and things like that. And so, but Giles is somebody that she's hugely formative for me.
So this is kind of off topic a little bit, but now that we're in this space, literature, the importance of reading, all of these things, I feel like Kentucky gets overlooked. And I don't want to cry, but it really does break my heart
Yeah.
when I see authors come through on book tours and they'll go to Cincinnati, they'll go to Nashville, but it's like Kentucky is overlooked. If you had unlimited funds, okay, and you could just open up just what could we do? What could happen? What do you think needs to happen to get more attention to Kentucky, get more books in,
Yeah.
especially in the eastern part of the state? What
It's
could we
it
do?
it's happening in different ways in bookstores across the region. With my second novel, I mean, with my novel, that my earlier novel, I went to a lot of independent bookstores, a lot of them, and small stores and where regional readers and writers would come to talk about things. So I think that that's one thing we have to do, is just to go out. But oddly, I believe that I think if you asked me 5 years ago, I wouldn't have said this, but I think that things like what you're doing, Instagrammers and, Bookstagram types and people who do these things, it's hugely important. They reach a ton of people. I've been deliberating about, I read a lot of old out of print Appalachian novels that you can only get in libraries and things like that. And I've been deliberating doing my own Instagram. I say, hey, this month I'm going to talk about this novel. It's Hubert Skidmore. He wrote in the 20s, or and here's this novel. It's about this exploitative company, and then talk about it, and then say, okay, I have another one for you next month. But really, it's the people who are on a lot and who get those writers on their show doing what we're doing now, and who get them to and say, hey, I've got a lot, follow my page, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I do think things are changing. Things are changing. I don't live in Appalachia. I'm not from Appalachia, but things are there are tons and tons of like I would call it like cultural, like fuel for cultural exposure going on in these regions right now. Bookstore in Hazard that Mandy Sheffield Fugit runs is really cool. And then there's bookstore in Barbersville, West Virginia. Well, there's lots and lots of them. This in Sylva, North Carolina. I've done readings at all these places. But the bookstagrammers do a really important service.
We try when we get a hold of a book. That's one thing
Yeah.
I can say. When a bookstagrammer gets a hold of a book that we like, we will run it to the ground. We are going
Yeah,
to
it's
sing the
cool.
praises as hard as we
Yeah,
can. It's
yeah.
just funny how we do, we see bookstagrammers come and go, and I think that people think that you're going to make money at this. You're not. You're not
Right,
going to
right.
make
It's
money.
cool. It's a labor of love. Yeah,
Yeah, you do it for the love of the book.
it's
You
cool.
really do.
It's really
Um,
admirable. Yeah.
what was the last book that you read that like that was out of what you normally read that surprised you and you said, what, for me, it was Dungeon Crawler Carl. If you would have how I even picked that up, I
Uh-huh.
have no idea, but I absolutely loved it. And I think that when I read outside of the normal genre, I
Yeah.
think it helps me to understand other authors. It helps me to review better too. I really do. If I stay in the same thing, the patterns, I don't see it as in depth. So is there something that you've read recently that surprised you that you're like, wow,
Yeah.
I loved that?
Um, her her name is Resivu something, or I can't remember her name, but this novel, she wrote these Kentucky novels that have. I've read a lot of books like this. Let me just say it this way: I've read a lot of books that you look at the front cover and it looks like what we might call like a bodice ripper, a novel. All this wake of novels that came out, say after Gone with the Wind, or any kind of these Southern romances, and they're in women's sections in the used bookstore, in the bookstore, and so I advise people to read widely. We often harbor a notion that literary fiction is the zenith of fiction, and these other things are just sort of novels that are mass produced. They're not. Many of these novels you read in there, you say, this is as good as any piece of literary fiction I read in the university in graduate studies. So I don't have a particular title, but I would say her name is Betty Lehman Restavue, by the way. I think that's what it is. She wrote these novels about Kentucky, some historical novels, but she also wrote these novels about the South that are like Gone with the Wind type things. Um, so, anyways, read widely is what I tell people, and don't reject something because of the cover of the book. Like I did that for years. So, well, I'm not going to be interested in anything in this women's romance section. It turns out I am quite interested in some of them.
I will every once in a while I dip out. I'm like, that's got everybody's talking about it. Let me see what it is. Unfortunately, the way that the Instagram algorithm works is even if I read it, I can't push it out. Even with as many followers as I have, it'll just fall. It'll just go flat.
It's interesting,
I don't
yeah.
say it. Yeah. So I mean, I keep those to myself, but yeah, it's a little tough sometimes. Um, Horror often asks big questions beneath the scares. What questions did you wrestle with, or did you want your readers to wrestle with while reading this book?
Yeah, the big one would be, I would think, would is is faith. Um, what we particularly in the 21st century, we're cynical about sometimes about religious figures, and sometimes we should be. There's been a lot of scandals, etc. But I wanted this to be something where people say like, "Wow, what is your relationship to faith, and what commitment do you have?" It doesn't have to be to faith, but to anything. Again, to think of the life of a nun, to put your desires aside and to focus on one, or a monk, for example. And so, one thing I wanted people to think about was why would one do that? What is there to it? You know, you hear these stories now and again about someone who was a Wall Street millionaire and he gave it up to go, live on a mountaintop, or she gave it up to go become, a religious cleric somewhere, or whatever it is. And it's very interesting to see why would people make those decisions, and what is it to religion and to faith that compels us even still today, as much as we're cynical about it. And I think sometimes we should be.
I'm, I'm saying, yeah, but I'm in a cynical phase right
Are you?
now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
unfortunately. Um, is there a question that someone hasn't asked you that you wish somebody would ask you about your book? Because this is
Um,
your time. I want to
yeah.
hear what you want to say.
Just I think really what I definitely want people to know before ahead of the game as much as possible that this is a novel that's not a salacious novel. Yes, it's a horror novel, but it's not a thing about nuns running wild or naked or having sex or something. That's simply not what it is, and it's not a carnal novel in that way either. Uh, Except for the fact that it is about a victory, which takes the place, like animal desires are come to the fore, come to the surface in this novel, and to what extent can they be quelled, or should they be, and how does faith figure into all that? Again, with the second novel, that's the big question. What are we doing here? Are we warriors, or are we nuns again? Are we both?
I mean, me having have read the book and thinking about it, that would be a tough question for them because
Yeah,
they want to rest and they want to get back to what they're
yeah,
supposed to be doing and what they were brought to the convent to do, especially the ones who this was their choice for life.
yeah,
And they want to be in to do what the nuns are to do. They don't want to fight a battle right now, so it will be hard. So this book has, and I don't know how to explain it because I don't want to say like dense is the wrong word.
uh-huh.
There's a lot to unpack on all of the pages. And as I read, I would see different things that I missed earlier, and then when I finish, it's like the gluttony. I didn't see it till the end. I didn't see that to the end. Do you like finding out like what your readers see as the book progresses, like or how
Yeah, you should keep a lot
as
of
how you grow?
secrets. I believe you should keep a lot of secrets from your reader if you can, and surprise them as much as you can, and turn the tables and create as much tension as you can. And also, to that end, your reader should never. This is how I feel. Other people don't feel. Should You shouldn't be afraid to kill a character and make a reader sad, or to sacrifice a character or something like that. That tension should always be there, that this can happen, and they should find out early that, hey, it definitely can happen. So as they're reading through, there's a sense of tension that's always there.
Are you doing any book tours with this book?
Yeah, I'm going to, when the book comes out, I'm going to do, again, those places that you talked about. I'm going to do a lot of bookstores around the region, in Appalachia and in Kentucky and Ohio and this area. And I'll probably just see what happens with it. But I'm going to definitely, I go to conferences and such. I was just at StokerCon, which is the annual horror conference. So I'll do something there. I'll be on a panel in next year's in 2027. And maybe the book will even be up for some of the awards, independent press or first novel in the genre or anything like that. So we'll see what happens. But I'm a pretty good promoter, so I'll definitely go on a tour, and we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Are you doing the Ink in the Hills in London?
I'm not signed up for that. I don't know that. Yeah.
I accidentally, I stepped into that one. I didn't know it was happening either. And, but it's the same weekend as the big one in Lexington
Oh yeah.
is.
Yeah.
So it's also the same weekend as Reader Nation in Las Vegas. So I
Right.
don't
Yeah.
know, but they are coming up. Is there a particular bookstore that you would like readers, if they want a signed copy, for them to reach out to?
Yeah. The Red Spotted Newt in Hazard, Kentucky. For sure. I'll have copies there. And you can always go to, I think it's bookstore.org. And if you don't want to buy from various large providers, it's up to you, of course. Joseph Beth I'll do an event there for sure. Probably do the book launch there. By the way, I should say, you had asked about this and I forgot to mention, but Fringe Publishers is linked up with Pipeline Media. And so I'm the first book on the press, and Pipeline Media and Fringe, their job or their goal is to try to come up in some way to to create a film or a TV series or something like that from their novels. So we'll see what happens in that end either, but I'm excited about that possibility too.
That is cool. You'll have
Yeah.
to let me know.
Wouldn't that
I
be
saw
cool? Yeah.
like the book launches and stuff from Thriller Fest when you were doing
Yeah.
all that. And Fringe put on a big show. They
Oh
did.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
they did.
so yeah, that was they had the party and everything like that, and so hopefully, as you say, how do we get people to read the books? So it's money and promotion and all that kind of stuff. But I'm really hopeful that, I don't know that it will happen, but I'm hopeful that somebody will say, hey, this would be a really cool series on Hulu, on Netflix, on Tubi, on whatever, on Shutter would be cool on Shutter.
Yeah. Is that your ultimate goal? I mean, is that like the pinnacle for you?
I would love to do something like that. I write about film and TV too for Crimereads and for other publications and such. So I would love for that to happen. I think that 20 years ago I would have said, "Oh, that's crass commercialism," but no longer. I would love to make some money and to have some kind of outlet where you say, "Hey, wow, this is a really cool series or movie."
Will you be able to let control of the book go to whoever's doing it?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing too. I will. Once you publish a book, any book, once it's out, part of your relationship to it is severed forever, which is a weird thing. All writers know this. People begin to talk about certain things, and a book begins to assume its own personality, its own shape, if you will. And some of that you can't really control any longer. But it's okay. Yeah, that's fine with me. Yeah.
I've talked to authors who were on both sides of it. Like, yes, I'm going to let it go. They're the ones who know what they're doing, and some are like, no, I'm
That
not.
I don't blame him. Sure, that's fine too. I remember listening to a writer said he sold a thing to a script to a company, and he said, "Well, I was just going to take the money and run." And it turns out that it made a really good film out of it. So now this is another thing. I'm really proud of it. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's really exciting. So give me all of your handles and way that readers or listeners
yeah.
can find you.
Thank you. My Instagram is McGinley-esque. It's McGinleyesque, McGinley-esque. And my X is Chris McGinley 12. And my Facebook is just Chris McGinley. You can find me there. And I have a website too. It's easy. Just type in my name and it'll come up. Yes, I appreciate you having me on. Thank you so
Well,
much.
I'm excited to talk to you. It's definitely a book that I would recommend anybody to read twice because you're going to come out with different things the second time.
I appreciate.
I definitely think you will come out with something different. And I know I've been holding my review, but I wanted to talk to you before I wrote
Yeah,
the review to make sure that I was clear on there, and maybe it's just like the gluttony thing that I keep coming back to. I just made that up in my head, but that's okay too. That's okay. You did that to me.
yeah, right. I created it. You're right.
Yeah, you had me thinking all of the things. So, I appreciated it. I really did enjoy it.
Thank you so much.
Well, it was good to talk to you, and I will see you somewhere. I'm sure I will try and get to
Yep.
Joseph Beth at least.
Yes, Teresa. I appreciate that. I'll definitely see you for sure.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much.